I destroyed the only man who truly loved me. 6 years later, I saw him again with a life I was never part of. What he did next shattered me more than my betrayal ever could. It has been 6 years since I destroyed the life of the only man who ever truly loved me. Back then, I was 28, married to David, a quiet, brilliant, deeply kind man. He wasn't flashy or overly romantic, but he was safe, loyal, and steady, the kind of man who folds your laundry without being asked, who makes your coffee just right every morning, who remembers your mom's birthday better than you do. But I was selfish. I confused his steadiness for boredom. I thought I needed more. Enter my boss, charming, rich, confident, and constantly flirting. I ignored the signs at first, but I liked the attention. It was flattering, addictive even. Somewhere along the line, flirting turned into drinks, and drinks turned into nights I can never take back. It wasn't even love. It was lust, ego, and a craving to feel desired. I told myself David would never find out, that it was just a phase. But secrets like that have a way of bleeding through the cracks an evening. I came home and found him sitting at the dining table with my phone in his hand. I'll never forget the look on his face. He wasn't angry. He was hollow, as if something inside him had quietly died. He didn't yell or cry. He just asked one question. Why? I didn't have a good answer. He packed a bag and left that night. No drama, no begging, just silence. I thought he might come back. He didn't. A month later, I got divorce papers. He never even asked for anything. Not the apartment, not the car, not a single piece of furniture. It was as if he wanted to erase me. The affair didn't last, by the way. My boss moved on to someone else within months. Turns out, I was just another thrill for him. I lost everything for absolutely nothing. Years dragged on. I moved cities, changed jobs, even tried therapy, but the guilt stayed, the shame stayed, and so did the memory of the man I broke. I told myself stories to cope, that he had probably found someone better, someone who appreciated his steadiness, his quiet brilliance, but that didn't soften the ache. It was a self-inflicted wound that refused to heal. Every relationship after him was a mirror reflecting my flaws at me. I became the woman who flinched at small kindnesses because they reminded me of David, the woman who sabotaged anything resembling stability because it felt like a lie. I buried myself in work, in surface-level friendships, in meaningless dates that ended with forced smiles and empty conversations. Nights became the hardest. That's when the memories sharpened, cutting through any distractions. That's when I saw his face the clearest, heard his voice the loudest. Last week, life decided to twist the knife a little deeper. I was in a bookstore, of all places, just wandering through fiction when I heard someone laugh. That laugh? Soft, deep, unmistakably David's. My heart jolted. I turned, and there he was, standing by the biography section, holding a little girl's hand. She looked about 4, had his eyes, those kind, patient eyes. A woman came up behind them, beautiful and warm-looking, and touched his arm. He smiled at her, the same way he used to smile at me. They looked like a postcard, a life rebuilt, a life I was no longer a part of. He didn't see me, or if he did, he didn't show it. I didn't speak to him. I just watched from a distance, heart pounding, throat dry. Then I left. The encounter haunted me. Every scene replayed in my head on a loop. The way his daughter clung to his hand, the gentle way he leaned down to listen to her, the smile he shared with his wife. I felt like an intruder peeking into a world that had moved on without me. And maybe that's exactly what I was. An outsider looking into a life that could have been mine if I hadn't been so blinded by selfishness. That night, I sat in my apartment, lights off, nursing a glass of wine, staring at the ceiling. The silence was deafening. The weight of my choices is suffocating. I realized then that I had been carrying this story alone for so long, a story heavy with regret and devoid of closure. Maybe that's why I'm writing this now. Not because I expect forgiveness. I know it's too late for that. But because some truths need to be spoken, even if only into the void. The days after seeing David were a blur. Work felt meaningless. Conversations felt hollow. My mind kept drifting back to that moment in the bookstore. I kept wondering if he had truly not seen me, or if he had and chose not to acknowledge me. Both possibilities stung. But one morning, as I sipped my coffee staring out the window, a strange clarity settled in. I had spent years wallowing in guilt, crafting narratives of self-pity, but I had never once taken responsibility in a way that mattered. Words in a journal were not enough. Regret without action is just vanity. I needed to confront my past. Not to seek redemption, but to acknowledge my wrongs out loud. With trembling hands, I drafted a letter. Not an apology letter in the conventional sense. This wasn't about seeking forgiveness. It was about confessing, about owning up to the damage I had caused without expecting anything in return. I wrote about my selfishness, about confusing steadiness for stagnation, about how I had taken his love for granted. I admitted how the affair was never about love, but about ego, about wanting to feel desired at the cost of everything real. I thanked him for his quiet kindness, for the mornings he made my coffee just right, for remembering my mother's birthday, for the love he gave so freely. And then I wrote the hardest line I have ever written. I said, "You deserve someone better, and I am glad you found her." I sealed the letter and slipped it into an envelope. I didn't have his current address, but I remembered the company he used to work for. I mailed it there, not knowing if it would ever reach him, but it felt like the only step I could take. The act of sending it felt like releasing a breath I had been holding for 6 years. I wasn't expecting a reply. I wasn't expecting anything, but for the first time, I felt a sliver of peace. A days passed. The heaviness lessened, not vanished, but eased enough to let me breathe. I began noticing small joys again, like the way sunlight pooled on my kitchen floor, or the rhythm of raindrops against the window. It was as if confessing had unlocked a part of me that had been trapped in a loop of self-inflicted punishment. Then, a week later, I received a letter in the mail. No sender name, just my name and address scrawled in a familiar handwriting. My heart raced as I opened it. Inside was a single page. His words were simple yet profound. "I saw you in the bookstore. I chose not to approach because I wanted you to see that I am okay. Not to hurt you, but to give you peace. We were not meant to last, but that doesn't mean the time we shared was meaningless. I have no anger left. Life has a way of mending hearts in ways we can't predict. I hope you find your peace too." I read the letter over and over, tears streaming down my face. It wasn't forgiveness in the traditional sense, but it was something even more powerful. It was acceptance. David had found his closure. Now, it was my turn to find mine. I realized then that life isn't about erasing mistakes but about learning to live with them in a way that honors the lessons they brought. I had spent so long being a prisoner of my guilt that I forgot life still had pages left to write. David had written his new chapters, and it was time for me to start. Mine folded the letter gently, placed it in a small wooden box along with the only photo I had left of us, and closed the lid. It was a symbolic act, not of burying the past, but of placing it where it belonged, in the past. I stepped outside that evening, feeling the cool breeze against my skin, and for the first time in 6 years, I felt free. Not because the weight was gone, but because I had finally decided to stop carrying it alone. I didn't need his forgiveness to move forward. I needed my own, and that journey had just begun.